Hey, it's Kley. Welcome to another video. Today, we are going to build this. This is a micro, kid-sized junior bass, whatever you want to call it. It's a pretty fun project. Fundamentally, all we're doing is we are taking a neck that I bought from China on eBay. It was about $50. This is a 24-inch scale length guitar neck meant for electric guitar. However, we are going to build this into a bass. So this is a custom body that I made myself by hand. We have an electric guitar pickup. We've got a bass bridge. We got some bass tuners. This whole project was extremely inexpensive, and I'm going to walk you through every step of the build process along the way, give you a little playing sample and a little bit of a review to see this, because it's kind of an experiment to see if this type of guitar works. So let's go ahead and dive into that. All right, so these are the raw materials I'm starting off with. This is a 2x4 and a little $50 neck that I got off of eBay. My daughter and I drew a headstock shape on there. That was her choosing. Then I'm just using a very simple jigsaw to cut this thing out. You can see that it's kind of moving a lot, so I stuck it in my vise. Had a little bit of success this way, except I couldn't see anything. Keep that PP on, guys. Gonna finish some of the shaping here on the belt sander. It's got a 60 grit paper on it. Now moving on to the body. I actually cut the 2x4. I went over to a friend's house. He had a table saw and a jointer and a planer, and so we cut that 2x4 into 4 equal length pieces, jointed them on one side, and then planed them down on the other side. Now I actually messed up because my planer would not accept the full length of the body, so I had to cut it in half, and then I could run it back through my planer. That gave me some nice square edges. Just kind of cleaning these things up a little bit. This isn't going to be the thickest body in the world, maybe about 1.5 inches. That's going to be fine. Then just gluing the two halves back together again and stick them in these clamps. Now I'm drawing on a shape. This is just what felt good to me. Didn't really think too much about it, just kind of eyeballed it. Not using any kind of template. Just a shape of a body that looked intriguing to my eye. And I'm cutting out with a jigsaw again. And again, some more shaping with the belt sander. Now we're going to work on the neck pocket. This is probably one of the trickier parts of the build. I'm going to use a router with a bearing bit, so it kind of can follow a template or a pattern. So basically I laid the neck where I wanted it, and I drew around it, and then I'm making this form, or this pattern, to go around it. And so I'm put some tape on, and I put super glue on the tape, just to hold these little bits of, this actually is 1/2 inch plywood, and so they're all uniform thickness. So I can put all these different pieces on here, and actually decided to double stack it. This just worked best with how my bearing bit worked. And so I made my little form here, and I'm using my router, using the bearing to follow the edge of the form, and just go all the way through and makes a nice clean cavity. Okay, now the nature of the bearings in my guide, it actually didn't quite get deep enough down to my line. So I switched to my straight cutting bit and decided to finish up the cut. And I'm actually cutting this but freehand. So I decided to just keep it a little bit like 1 millimeter or 2 away from the edge. And kind of going back through this, maybe I could have adjusted my form or taken a layer off the form. But just the nature of the way my bearing bit worked, I was having trouble getting down deep enough without the top of the spinning part getting in there. So I decided to just freehand it and leave myself a little proud, and then I used my chisel to flatten these edges. And actually this worked just fine. Chisel probably could be a little sharper, make cleaner work of this. The wood is actually, this 2x4 wood, by no surprise, is very soft. And so it worked fine. But in the end, this was my neck pocket. It certainly is not perfect, but it actually is very tight and very snug pretty much all the way around. So overall, I was actually very, very happy with how this neck pocket turned out. You can see the fretboard just sits a little bit proud on the edge there. There's a little bit of a divot there on the bottom corner, but I'm not stressing about it too much. I think it's going to work just fine. So now I'm going to be routing out some of the cavities on the rest of the parts of the body. This is for the humbucker pickup. This is just like a $13 no-name humbucker that I got off of eBay. It's an Alnico 5 neck pickup humbucker, but I think it'll sound great on bass, so we're going to go with it. Then I'm going to do a rear route, and I'm going to have 2 spots here for a volume and for an output jack. And then I'm going to use my drill to kind of hog out some of this material. Basically, the idea of the drill is just to alleviate some of the pressure from the router. You don't want to dull the router bit. It's easier to buy more drill bits than it is router bits. So I want to try to do some of the heavy lifting with the drill bit. But then I do come back through and clean it up with the router. Now again, I don't have any kind of template, so I'm just freehanding this. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but it's not. It means that the overall cut isn't perfect. You know, like little things like the little ears where the pickup mount parts go. You know, it's not perfect, but it does not bother me at all. I actually don't mind a little bit of that handmade aesthetic. But if you're somebody that wants it to be perfect, I'd recommend just doing as much as you can with the router and just using templates. You can get them for they're not too expensive, and you just template the whole thing. But now I did a round over. I think this is a 1/2 inch round over, and then I'm just doing some sanding with my palm sander. And after quite a bit of sanding, this was actually partway through, I decided to keep going after this. There still were some burn marks and still some rough spots. The body as a whole needed a lot of sanding. But I started at 80 grit and went up to 150 and then 220, and was pretty happy with how smooth it was at 220 grit. But that's the body. Looking like a guitar. Now some of the internal stuff, you got to drill the cavity from the pickup down into the control cavity. And a little bit of trouble with this, it really helps if you have a very long, an abnormally long drill bit. That's kind of hard to come by, and so I had to kind of work with that a little bit. I did put some coats of boiled linseed oil on this. I wasn't actually sure how I was going to finish it. I was planning on painting it for a while, but I did some boiled linseed oil and actually thought it looked pretty nice. So now I'm back on working on the neck. I kind of put some rough estimations as to where I think the strings will go so that I could lay out drilling the holes for the tuning pegs. These are like like $15 tuners that I got off of eBay for bass, and I'm just kind of laying them out generally. Now, I did make a little bit of a mistake here because I basically made it so that where the strings are is the center of the tuning peg, and you actually want it to be offset just slightly because the strings wrap around the side of the tuning peg. They don't go straight, even though you start with it going into the hole, the center of the tuning peg, the wraps go just so like a centimeter to the side. So there's a little bit of flaring that happens. If I do it all over again, I would adjust them a little bit, just a centimeter to the side. But overall, not a problem. I drilled the holes, and I just use a drill bit until they fit nice and snug, and screwed in the nuts. Now, drilling holes for the neck. Again, I'm not using any kind of template or not even using a back plate. I'm just using some wide-headed washers and wide-headed screws, and just drilled 4 holes. And honestly, it worked great. The neck has been very firm and stiff. So now I'm taking a measurement of 24 inches from where the nut will start at the top of the guitar, 24 inches, and I made 2 marks there. That's where I'm going to put my saddles, and more on that decision later. But then I give myself some centralizing lines there from the sides of the neck, and I'm going to try to fit the saddles in between there. I actually really like these saddles. They're individual, so you have a lot of control over where you want to put them. And the only problem is that they don't sit flat. I would have preferred finding some saddles that just drill and sit flat on top of the body. and then also are top mounted, but these are through the body type type saddles. And so you have to drill a hole through, and then they also have these like tabs, or these like little brackets that need to mount into the body. So you actually have to like inlay them. So I'm just outlining the location of those little inlays that needs to go down into the body. And then I'll drill those out. You can see those little tabs there, the inlays. I'm using my drill press for no other reason than just it was set up and it was easy to get these very vertical holes to go straight through the body and then to start opening that out. And then I came back with the router once I kind of had hogged out some material just to make it nice and flat and uniform. And this area is going to be covered up. I wasn't actually needing this to be super tight and flush. So I used the router there, just drilling some pilot holes, and then I'm going to drive in some screws. And with these screws, I did run into a little bit of a problem. The front screws are in the travel area of the saddle, so you actually want to use a smaller headed, flat-topped screw head. And the ones in the rear can be a little bit bigger. But at first install, I used probably too large of a screw. Now, here in this fourth saddle, I'm drilling a hole that's going to go into the pickup cavity, and that's going to provide travel for the ground wire that will be left bare, and then the saddle will just pinch it down onto the body, and that will provide the ground connection to the strings. You can see I initially mounted the pickup directly into the body, but I did change that later, and I put a pickup ring. We'll come to that. It just made it for an awkward way to adjust the pickup height. But then I did need to enlarge the holes for the string through. You can actually see I'm having a hard time with these holes just because this wood is so kind of chintzy. So adjusting over now to the nut. This is a bone nut blank. And I went to another bass guitar that I owned and drew the lines on there just to give me an idea where the spacing should be. Not trying to get too creative or do any math, just happened to have another bass guitar, and so I copied as much as I can from that other bass. If you don't have a bass guitar, I do think you can look up the math of string spacing to figure out where you should cut it. But then I'm starting the cuts here with a Japanese pull saw, just because I thought that was a nice way for me to be precise and get them exactly where I wanted them. And then I decided to finish up the process with the nut installed. So I actually use just a little dab of super glue, a small line of super glue. And then now I'm coming back. These are my fret files, or my nut files. I've had these for a long time. Actually, I got them off of Amazon years ago, and they work just fine for guitar. But for bass, you can see I'm using my thickest one, but it does not fit. So then I came back with a fingernail polishing file just to widen the saddle. And then I basically I also added some 120 grit sandpaper, wrapping that around and using that to, again, enlarge and widen these slots. And this is actually kind of nice because I could custom make them, right? I had the string dangling there. I could always just run it into, you can see I'm pressing it in there to see how my fit is. You can see it's getting better. It's got a little bit of a V shape, but still not quite there. So I just kept going back and forth with that. Now, to install the string into the tuner, I ran into a problem because you can see here it does not fit. The string is too fat in this location. It's not expecting, a typical bass string is meant to be much longer. And then, so what I had to do is you can actually remove the outer layer of wrap around the string. And so I had to remove quite a bit of that outer layer of the metal that makes the string up. So it's basically, you can see it there. It's just the inner part that kind of matches the diameter, and so that will fit into the tuner, and then I can tune it well from there. These are string in or hole through type tuners, so you got to cut them to length, put it down into the hole, and then tune it up from there. And then you can see this is kind of the initial look here. The action is really, really high. The break angle is pretty sharp, and we'll have more discussion about this later, but just getting my first feel for how the setup's going to be. Now you can see with all 4 strings installed, you can see just that tiny bit of flaring where the strings are not perfectly straight as they travel into the headstock or into the tuners from the nut. Not quite ideal, as I would have done it a little differently next time. but it's going to work, not a problem. I don't think it actually affects tuning stability negatively at all. Drill some holes for the straps, the strap buttons. I tend to actually build my own strap buttons from, you can go to the hardware store and get a screw and get a nylon washer and then a large fender washer and use that as your own DIY lock strap. But this piece of wood is the thumb rest. Now for the most satisfying part. Lucy, peel the sticker.
If it works, could we take it and paint it for somebody?
Absolutely. You can see here I'm just doing a couple dabs of super glue and then a little dab of wood glue. And the super glue is going to act like a clamp, and then the wood glue is going to give it a long-term permanent connection. And that's going to be my thumb rest. Okay, I got the neck off. I am going to put a shim on. This is a little piece of cardboard. I actually got it off of this box of nails. And it's going to sit right in here. It's going to kick the neck angle a little bit this way. So the action will be lower. This part of the neck will be higher. This part of the neck will kick down just a little bit. It's cardboard, so it will actually compress just slightly, which is fine. I don't want it to be too thick. Just a little bit of a kick in that angle, and it's going to be just fine. Basically, just put it in here. I made mine small enough that it's not even going to mess with these screw holes, so I don't have to do any modification other than just put it in and reinstall the neck. I did decide to change over to use a pickup ring, just because I felt like that would give me better adjustability to get the pickup height right. And it's just a black pickup ring. It actually worked great. Just screwed it right on top and put some metal springs in there, and the pickup adjusted perfectly. The wood is so soft that I didn't even have to drill a pilot hole. I can literally just push a little bit of pressure and screw the screw in, and it drives in without any problem. Now I'm installing the electronics. I've got a simple 500K volume pot. We're going to run a ground connection to the back of the pot. And a little bit of solder here to remove. This was used previously. You can see the green wires are going to the back of the pot. There's a green wire coming from the pickup, a green wire coming from the wire that runs to the saddles, and then you're going to have one to the third leg of the pot, and then you're going to have one that goes to the output jack. That'll give you a good ground across the whole connection. You want to get the soldering iron hot enough that the solder will flow freely. It's a lot of metal to heat up, so you do need a little bit more heat when you're doing this, but you don't want it too hot that you nuke the inside of the pot. And then I just find a screwdriver helps pin those wires down while I lift the soldering iron up, because otherwise they're free-floating. It's kind of annoying. But if you use that screwdriver trick, I think it works okay. Then this goes to the sleeve connection on the output jack. That's the one that's highest and connected to that middle shaft. Then the pickup, it came with a wiring diagram. The green wire goes to the input. That's leg 1 of the volume control. You can see I'm also just applying a little bit of paste wax. That just helps the solder flow nicely. Then the blue wire there's the paste wax. Then the blue wire here is going to be my hot output. So coming out of the output of the volume pot into the tip connection on the mono output jack. Could not be any easier. Just dead simple volume and output. A little bit of paste wax, a little J-hook on the wire, and then I hit it with a little bit of solder. A little bit of heat shrink tubing on the unused wires to potentially split the coil, which I didn't even want to do, and then wrap it up and you're good to go. This is the knob that I'm using on this bass. It's actually was intended for guitar amplifiers, but I think it looks kind of cool and it was kind of fun to use on a bass. Now, I can sit down and play this thing. I started to play the bass, feeling the groove. However, I had a big problem. Okay, so I have my bass connected to my computer. I'm running a tuner on my audio interface. The issue I'm running into that I'm not really understanding. If I play the open E string, that's in tune. If I even go up to like a G, it's about 5 cents flat. If I go to an A, pushing about 12 cents flat. If I go all the way to the octave, it's about 40 cents flat. I'm sorry, this is all sharp, 40 cents sharp. What that's telling me is that I need to move these saddles backwards, but I've already done that. I've already moved them back, and I currently have them set as far back away as I possibly can. So I guess I need to just keep trying to move these guys back. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that yet, but I'm having trouble intonating this thing. Okay, I've been doing some further exploration, and I started a thread on TDPRI about this intonation issues. It really should be like this. And if you do that, then the 12th fret is pretty much spot on. It's a little hard to show you this without, I really need a third hand, but if I butt this up here, and you look down here, it does appear to me that it's pretty much the 12th fret, which is right here, is right at 12 inches. So the neck is, in fact, a 24-inch neck. Now, 24 inches would be right about here, which, you know, for being pretty precise, my saddles are just a little bit past that. But the TDPR thread suggested that the saddles actually need to, like, instead of being at their rearmost point of adjustment, at the 24-inch mark, they really need to be like the opposite, like at their forwardmost point of adjustment. So I probably need to move these saddles back another half of an inch. The other thing that I'm considering is, I don't know how I'll be able to see this, but where I have the strings through, this was kind of a janky way to do it, but it works fine. I just took some washers and some nuts, and just kind of as a temporary, see how this would work. And I think I'm going to redo this because these holes were drilled for the previous location. So if, I don't know if you'll be able to tell this, but if you look at where, like, you want the strings to be at the 90, but they're actually tilting back like this a little bit. And that's making this break angle really sharp. And I think what that's doing is, especially with this low string, it's really messing with that, causing it to almost arc a little bit. It doesn't like to move like that. So I might even try actually drilling the holes almost more like this through the body to give it a shallower break angle and see how that does it for me. Okay, I'm out in the garage, and this little line is where the saddles were. Right here, you can see this is where I just pulled them out. So this is kind of approximately where the saddles were. I want to go back from that. And I want to go back such that, right, you can see this one is maxed out this direction. I want to actually max it out this way. And then this bottom one actually is where they were initially installed when I first set this bass up. So you can see, this would explain why my intonation has been so bad. I'm not 100% sure why it's not working at this point, because I think it should be in the ballpark, but I don't know what else to do other than just keep pulling these suckers back. So this is where I was at originally, and I probably need to get it to about here, which is crazy. It also is going to cause a problem because if you can see there, I don't have anything to screw into there on the bottom. So honestly, what I'm probably going to do is get my router, mark that, and route out a lot of this right in here to make this open, and then I'm probably going to manufacture and route this as well so it's just cleaner, and then I'll probably just glue in a new piece of wood to cover these holes and give me something that these front screws can bite into. That's the only way I can make any sense of this. Back to the router I go. Need to hog out some of that material and create a nice flat surface also on the front where I'm going to be putting the insert piece of wood to give my screws something to bite into on the top. So just routing a nice flat cavity basically across the whole thing. And there you can see the insert piece of wood that's going to go on the top half of this. You can see the top screws will give them something to bite into. Just wood glue that sucker in there. And you can see the lines I'm making, that's my 24-inch line. Again, the top part, the most forward adjustment point is going to be at 24 inches. And you can see it's actually just even about 1/8 of an inch long, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, I've got this thing stringed up again. This is the old string through holes. You can see I've moved them back. So actually the strings are at a little bit of an angle. Instead of being a perfect 90, they're at a little bit of an angle. So this break angle here is going to be softer. I think that's going to cause the strings to sit better and give me a little bit better setup. So I am getting a little bit of, actually the neck is a little curved this way. So I'm going to let this kind of settle in overnight and give it some attention again tomorrow. And hopefully this thing will intonate a little bit better. Fingers crossed. Okay, start with G.
Are you alright? Asked Emma with her
Then go to C.
peanut butter.
Yep.
Sort of, said Emma.
Move your right hand down.
Now,
There you go.
Zuzu's turn. Zuzu
Back to
was
G.
the best carburetor in the gymnastics club. She was almost
Make sure you push this one down a little bit better.
She could do
There you go.
7
Good.
push-ups in a row. Nobody else could do even one. Zuzu
Nice job.
ruffled.
All right, do that again.
I want to try.
Nice.
Hey,
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video so far. I'd like to close it out by giving kind of a review or synopsis. Was all this effort and experimentation worth it? How did it play out in the end? And my initial reaction is I actually had a ton of fun making this instrument. It was a ton of fun getting my girls to help and kind of getting them to buy in and get excited about it and provide some contribution towards the build. And to see them kind of pick it up and play it has been a ton of fun. I guess my current philosophy on parenting is I just want to expose my children to music as much as I can and give them as much free opportunity to have the ability to pick up an instrument and play it. I'm going to try not to force it or make it unfun, but if they want to play it, if they show interest, I certainly want to give them the availability and the opportunity to do so. So, second, I would definitely frame it that this whole thing was really an experiment. It was kind of a hypothesis test, really. I just kind of got it in my head to try this micro scale bass. I really had a couple of different design philosophy goals. Number one, I wanted to spend as little money as possible on my costs. Number two, I wanted to test out one of these $50 necks from eBay to see if they're junk or if they're worth anything. Certainly you can look that up on the internet and get some reviews, and everybody's going to tell you all this stuff from China is probably total garbage. But I wanted to just test it out for myself in kind of a low-risk manner. Also wanted to get something that might have been playable for my kids, as I talked about. That was really a major factor, is kind of helping share my love of music and instruments and building and tinkering with things with them. And so, hopefully they might enjoy that as well. And lastly, I just kind of wanted to be a little bit creative and see, building a body from scratch, how that went, and trying tinkering with some of my lutherie and guitar setup knowledge towards the objective of making a 24-inch scale length bass. So just kind of thought that would be fun and interesting in kind of a weird, quirky way. So those are my design goals. Now, I want to go kind of piece by piece through this thing. Let's talk a little bit about the top. I bought some really, really cheap hardware, like the tuners and the saddles. They were like $13 on eBay, and honestly, they've been fantastic. I have no complaints whatsoever about this really, really cheap guitar hardware. I think with a good setup, a well-lubricated nut, both the tuner and the bridge work fantastically, and I'm kind of shocked. I was really expecting a lot worse performance, but overall would recommend them, and I'll have links down in the description below if you want to check any of the stuff, the hardware and stuff out that I used in this video. The nut is a bone nut that I actually made from a blank. It was a way oversized blank, so I had to cut it down using my bandsaw and my belt sander, and then I shaped it, kind of in a unique way, starting with a Japanese pull saw, and then I used some of my guitar nut slot files, and then transitioned into using what was basically like a fingernail polisher or a rasp, and put some sandpaper on it. And actually that whole process went really, really well. I was able to dial in for these crazy, crazy, wicked, huge strings, and overall was really happy with how that played out. Now, to talk a little bit about the neck as a whole, I think was actually a big success. Again, this was $50 on eBay, 24-inch scale length, maple with the rosewood fretboard. It's got a bit of a tilt-back headstock. I don't love the tilt-back headstock. I tend to prefer flat headstocks. I think they're maybe a little more durable and prone to resisting falling, but whatever. It was kind of fun to cut out the headstock shape. It was really my daughter who drew the shape on there, and kind of I wouldn't say that we did the best job of drawing out the headstock, but honestly, I'm happy with it. I think it works fine. Holds the tuners on well, and it looks okay. The neck as a whole actually feels really nice. I did sand it, and it feels really, really smooth. I applied a boiled linseed oil finish, and that feels really, really smooth. again, because this is going to be a children's instrument, I'm not even going to try to like put a pristine paint on it and get it for a long-lasting longevity. I'm aware boiled linseed oil is a very minimal protective finish, but this thing's going to get bumped around and dinged and scratched, and that's just what it is, and I'm accepting that from the get-go. So on the way there, it might as well be smooth and fun and interesting to play. I did not do any fretwork, and honestly, the frets are fine. They feel great. Obviously, we're playing this as a bass, and so precise fretwork and shredding and stuff really isn't part of it. Just given the nature of this instrument, having kind of a lower tolerance fretwork is fine, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. And so overall, the neck feels really good, and I probably will be buying another one of these really cheap $50 or $60 eBay necks because I actually think it works great. Even the truss rod seems to be working, so overall, pretty successful there. Now, regarding the strings and the scale length, that's probably the biggest variable in this build, and actually, it was a real pain to get the bridge location figured out, and some of that was just my own inexperience and a good learning opportunity. I learned a ton, but overall, I would say the scale length is a success. The bass intonates well. It certainly has a very unique and interesting, quirky, short feel and tonality to it. Just the whole thing is really unlike my other bass, but it's very comfortable to play. It's easy and comfy to press and hold against your body and play it. It really, because it's kind of a low, thuddy tonality, it's very deep. I think that's the thick strings and the short scale, so it doesn't have a lot of growl or attack or zing. It's just kind of this low, thuddy bass that you really just want to play very straightforward, solid, low-end bass lines and just kind of thump away down there close to the nut. I don't really find myself going up to the higher strings and registers just because this bass really isn't meant for that. It's meant to just give you a very basic, straightforward playing experience and works great for that. And so overall, I'm actually pretty pumped about this. It gives me a unique recording instrument. It's just kind of a fun topic of conversation. Could even see like bringing it to gigs or practices and giving it to bass players and seeing their opinion. It's just kind of a fun thing to talk about, and I really like it. I accomplished my build objectives. I think it's fun. It's fun to pick up. It inspires me to pick it up and play it and gives me a unique experience when I do so. There are certainly some downsides. I would say the overall tonality of this bass is pretty dark. It doesn't have a lot of that top mid-range or top end, so especially I think when it just has a ton of low-end information, strong low-end fundamental. And so again, like I said, it really leans itself into that rocking on the fundamental, just really providing a solid bass low-end without a lot of that like high-end or treble or mid-range information. And so in some ways, that's actually a big strength of this instrument, but in other ways, it means it's not super flexible to do other jobs that you would want to do a different bass for. And so I wouldn't want this to be like the only bass in my arsenal. Now, in regarding to my children to play it, I kind of have mixed feelings. The one thing is because the strings are super thick, and for a little more context on the strings, I ran a string calculator, and so I'm taking a 5-string set, so it's 130 gauge. It's meant for a low B on a 5-string bass. I'm using those 4 lowest strings for the 4 strings on this. And then from the 5-string fret, the highest one, that would typically be your G string, I'm just not using. So it's extremely thick gauge. And that's because on a string tension calculator, using that heavy of a gauge actually pretty much equalizes the tension that gets pulled. So it kind of creates a similar feel as what a regular bass would be, at least with string tension. So that is a positive. But it does require a pretty good amount of force to press down on the frets. And so for my kids who are going to struggle with that even to begin with, they definitely report that it feels pretty hard to push down, and they don't really love that. So for them, that is something they're going to have to get used to any which way. But because that low E string is so thick, and that's what a lot of what they're learning on is, playing E, F, G on the E and A string up to C, it's a little harder for them to play. But on the other hand, because it's so small and comfy, it's easy for them to hold. They certainly can reach it without having to reach their arms so far away. That's a success. They have been interested in it and seem to want to play, so that's a success. Next, I want to talk about the body. The body was made in a pretty crude fashion, using basic stuff. I did use a router for quite a bit of it, but other than that, it was pretty crude. I didn't use any templates or anything like that. It just kind of what felt right to me. The biggest thing I would say about the body is it's too big in relation to the neck and the scale length. I kind of patterned it off my other bass or my other electrics. Like it's pretty much the same size as like a Telecaster or a Strat style body. And it's just too big. I need to really trim it down by about maybe 20% all the way around all the edges. And I might even open up a little bit of the higher fret axis. And then it would just kind of fit the overall theme a little bit better. It's a little too big for my girls. It kind of sits up really high against their chest. So I would actually like to take it all apart and make it smaller. The wood that I used was a 2x4 from my local hardware store. It is like cheese. It's some of the softest wood I've ever used, which honestly is fine. If this was a more important project or something I wanted to last a little bit better, I would use a better hardwood. But because it's a children's instrument, I'm just kind of embracing the fact that they're going to ding it up. So might as well make a really easy to ding wood. And I'm not trying to protect it and keep it pristine. So let's just ding it up from the start. But when I built it, it is really soft. And so, there are spots when the wood tears out, and maybe some of that's just me as a woodworker not being super skilled either, but it's rough. And I'm totally fine with that. It doesn't bother me at all. I may take it apart and trim it down and kind of reconfigure like how I'm terminating the strings and the string through with how they're poking through the back. I might come up with a different solution for that. But overall, though, it was a ton of fun to build, and I learned a lot. It was fun to brush off some of those old skills and just kind of see how my creativity and woodworking would work, and I'm really glad that I did that. Do want to comment just briefly on using the pickup. This is a 6-string PAF style, low to medium output humbucking pickup for 6-string electric guitar, and it actually works great in this bass. I haven't noticed any weirdness or any problems with it, and have no issues whatsoever. It's fun to play. Sounds good. It's pretty clear. I don't know how to separate the variables between the scale length and the string, contributing to the low thuddy tone, whether it's the humbucker. So maybe at some point I'll experiment with something else. Maybe a single coil would work better to complement the low thuddy strings to give some brightness and some clarity. So I might try that, but don't have any concerns. It was like 10 or 15 bucks. So for this project, it works great. And, honestly, overall, this project was just a ton of fun. I really enjoyed building it. I enjoyed collaborating with my girls. I enjoyed problem solving through some of these unique issues. And now that I've got this bass, I'm going to leave this thing up here in my living room right next to my desk. My girls tend to spend a ton of time in this area playing. They sit at this desk all the time listening to music. And so I've got a little Fender practice amp and the bass and a cable. I'm just going to leave it here and kind of hope and encourage that they may be inspired to pick it up and play it. I know I probably will be inspired to pick it up and play it, and just think overall this was a lot of fun. So I'd love to hear your feedback, your comments, your questions, your any response of how you think it went down in the comment section below. Really glad you guys checked it out for this lengthy video, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.